Hello and welcome to the Swan Song Podcast. My name's Ben Buddy Slack. I'm the founder of the Swan Song Project and the host of this podcast. Swan Song Project is a charity. We're based here in Leeds, England, and we help people who are facing the end of their lives or dealing with a bereavement to write and record an original song. We believe in celebrating lives, making memories, and leaving legacies. If you'd like to find out more about the charity, you can visit our website, which is swansongproject.co.uk. The podcast features songwriters. Every episode I have a different songwriter on. I ask them to share with us one of their songs. We talk about how they wrote it. I ask them to share a songwriting tip, and I also ask them for a song that's meaningful to them in some way related to bereavement. This episode features Sean Taylor. It's a really interesting conversation. We talk about his song, The Heart of the Ocean, which is really interesting. And we've discovered beforehand that we're both huge Tom Waits fans. Tom Waits is one of my biggest heroes, and also one of Sean's biggest heroes. So the last section we were talking about song about bereavement, we talked about Tom Waits quite a lot, which was very enjoyable. Because so if you're a Tom Waits fan listening to this, you'll probably really enjoy that section because it's two Waits nerds enjoying themselves. But either way, I hope you enjoy the podcast. If you do, please like, share, and subscribe. We're really trying to grow the podcast. I've got lots more great guests coming up that you're not going to want to miss. But without further ado, here is Sean Taylor on the Swan Song Podcast. Enjoy. Okay, today I'm here with Sean Taylor. Thanks for joining me, Sean.
It's good to be here.
We're looking forward to talking to you. So for anyone new to the show, this is the Swan Song Podcast. Every episode I have a different songwriter on, and we do it in 3 sections. So first, we're going to have one of Sean's songs. We're going to have a bit of a chat about how he wrote it. Then in section 2, I'll ask Sean for a song. In section 2, I'll ask Sean for a songwriting tip. And then in section 3, I'm going to ask him for a song that's meaningful in some way related to bereavement. So over to you, Sean. Which song of yours have you chosen to talk to us about today?
The song I've chosen is called The Heart of the Ocean. And I started writing this song when I was 21 years of age. And I finished writing this song when I was 36.
Oh, wow.
It took me 15 years to write. It started out as this little phrase: spirits of the dead are buried in the ocean. We can feel their sacred warmth laced inside the notion that all that goes returns again someday in the heart of the ocean. I had that straight away. And I just couldn't add anything for years. I was just kept going back to it. And so I had the first verse basically straight off when I was 21. And I just couldn't finish it. I kept coming back. And it started as a guitar piece. Then it was a piano piece. Then it was a guitar piece. And then eventually I just said, I've got to finish this. And I was like 36. I remember sort of 15 years on, and I finally got it together and I put it on piano, and it's like, it works as a piano piece. But it was I toured with it as well. I was taking it to gigs, trying to get it to fit, and I just couldn't. I had this weird effect thing I was doing for years, which nearly worked, but it never quite worked. And then eventually I sat back at the piano. It actually started at the piano. It didn't start at the guitar, this song, but then it went guitar, piano, and then back to piano. And it was like, oh, I've got to finish this. So eventually I finished it. But yeah, it was of all this, one of the songs I've written. It took 15 years to finish it. So.
Wow, yeah, that's a long time. Good stuff. So yeah, that's really interesting. We'll have a listen to it now, and then we'll have a bit more chat about it afterwards. So yeah, this is The Heart of the Ocean.
Spirits of the dead are buried in the ocean. We feel their sacred warmth laced inside the notion that all that goes returns again someday in the heart of the ocean, in the heart of the ocean. Love never dies. It lights the highest star over the darkest night, when the waves glisten with the moon's loving eyes. You are with me tonight in the heart of the ocean. warmth of your soul in the heart of the ocean, in the heart of the ocean. As days turn to years, time marches on. I can still see your face, and I can still hear your voice. And moon pulls the strings of the tide, like your heart pulls on a mine. In the heart of the ocean, in the heart of the ocean. Seeing sky one, 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 seeing sky, seeing sky, seeing sky, seeing sky one. In the heart of the ocean.
Okay, beautiful. So that was the Heart of the Ocean. 15 years in the making.
Yeah, absolutely. I had no grey hair when I started writing. Now,
It's so interesting that, and so I'm assuming that when you talk about songs that take that long, it's not that you spent 15 years every day working on that song. It's been 15 years like working on it sometimes and going back to it and working on other stuff as well. I imagine is the case. But what was it? Do you think that made it take so long? And what? So did you? You said you had that first verse straight away. Were you able to? Did you have the whole musical structure and were struggling with the lyrics? Did you have the rest of the lyrics and were struggling with the musical structure? Was there anything specific that was the hold up, do you think?
all of it. All of it was a hold up. I had the lyric and I had a rough idea of the chords, but like I knew it wasn't going to be a complicated progression, but it was more to do with the way the lyric kind of fits the meter of the lyric. I find that's always a key thing for me with songwriting. I find the best songwriters, they're great at getting the meter, the rhythm right, whether it's Dylan, Townes Van Zandt, Marvin Gaye. They have this way of changing the chord at the moment that the rhythmic meter of the lyric, it just fits perfectly. And it's like, if you look at the lyric sheet and you look at the chords, if they'd have just moved that chord slightly to the left, it wouldn't be as good a song. And I mean, Townes Van Zandt is a really good example, I think, of that. He's incredible. And Dylan, I think, is very much not the beginnings, but he's so important, Bob Dylan, for that way of writing. But for this song, because it was quite an unusual lyric it doesn't really rhyme. There's the odd little rhyme here and there. It doesn't rhyme. You got to be really careful where the chords come in and where they move. And I mean, it is just 3 chords, but it was the way I went through quite a few different progressions before I came back to 3 chords, and I never got it right. But yeah, everything needed work, and it just kept going backwards and forwards. I love that expression, heart of the ocean. I had that. I knew I wanted to write a song about, 1, the ocean, and 2, grief, because I think they're connected. I'm not religious, but I've always seen the ocean as quite a sacred thing. And I've always seen, thinking of people that are gone, I've associated that with looking at the sea. I don't know why. But I just have quite a connection with the sea. And I've moved to Brighton, so, because I have a real connection with the ocean. And I've always seen people that are gone inside the ocean in a kind of unusual way, because it's eternal, the ocean. So that was what I wanted to do, but it just took a long time to get there.
Yeah. So did you have that clear aim for the song at the start, that you kind of knew from that first verse where you wanted it to go and everything, and what you wanted to say?
Absolutely. I think from then it's interesting. I started writing it at 21, because I think my songwriting changed quite a lot then. I'd started writing songs when I was 14, and they were just kind of copied of Oasis with the band of the day. I always loved their early stuff, but before they were 500 quid a ticket, but it was like I liked I was sort of trying to write songs before I could play guitar, and then I started playing guitar, and then I started gigging when I was 17. And the first few years of gigging, it was very innocent, very didn't know what I was doing. I was very young, and I remember around 21, I got into reading a lot more for enjoyment. I got into reading poetry. That was a key thing for songwriting. For me, you read a really great poet and you see the rhythm of the line, and that really changed the way I write songs, because suddenly I thought you can do things with lyrics, with words, with certain sounding words. Suddenly thinking about the number of syllables in each line, thinking about the different types of line. Are you going to do two different types of rhyme, I should say? So you can do an A-B rhyme, A-B rhyme, or an A-A-B. I forgot all the different terms. But it's weird. The minute you start playing around with, does the first line and the second line rhyme, or does the first line and the third line and the second line and the fourth line rhyme? The minute you start playing with that, there was all these melodic possibilities. And that came through reading poetry, not necessarily listening to songs. So that was interesting. The beginning of that song. I think that song was, to be honest, at the beginning, it was like a poem, and then it became a song. So yeah, poetry is very important. I think every songwriter should read poetry. I think it should be part of our workout,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it does have a very poetic feel to it lyrically, this one, doesn't it?
Thank you.
And so that first verse, do you remember, did it just come to you whole, or do you remember sitting down to write it, and were you thinking of this kind of wanting it to be in a particular meter or anything then, or was it just it just came through? And
I think I was listening to a lot of Van Morrison, and he's very much the heart ocean. There is a rhyme actually there, buried inside the notion, and ocean does rhyme obviously, but it's that kind of very free flowing verse. And I was listening to a lot of Van, and I love his early stuff, and it's that kind of freedom of a verse when it just drifts all over. I mean, for me, one of the best people for that is Joni Mitchell. When she writes, there's just this, it's like a jazz solo, it's beautiful lyrics as well. But Van does it as well, and So yeah, that did arrive pretty much in its entirety. That does happen sometimes. You'll just sit down and it'll happen at very strange times. I have often before a gig. That's become a weird tradition. I think it's just the nerves before I go on stage, and I'll pick a guitar up, and suddenly a song will happen.
Yeah.
And you're trying to get it on your phone before you go have to play. It's like that's happened so many times. I just think that's nervous energy, to be honest. Go, manifest it as a song, But
it's a good way of manifesting it, isn't it?
it is, and I mean, I think for me, it's one of these songs which proves the point. Always get everything down, write everything down, record everything down. I've got this obsession with filming myself play chords, like filming the hands on the guitar, because never studied music, so I kind of know what's what, but I've got all these really bizarre videos on my phone that are like, it'll just be one bass note on a piano, and it'll be like, and somehow or another through that process, songs happen. And I remember not being able to use a phone for a while, lost it, and I suddenly realized my mobile phone is really important for songwriting. It's become a really key vehicle for songs. So yeah, I've got these weird things of just filming. Like we were writing this morning, me and my friend, and we were just filming certain phrases on certain lines, on playing it and singing it together. And I'm sure other musicians do that, but I've become obsessed with that. Like, I've got to see exactly what C chord in what shape, and
and so it's important for the visual, the filming of it, rather than would it be different from just recording like the audio of you playing? Is there something in the visual that's important to you?
Definitely when it's with someone else, because, for example, if I'm singing, I mean, and I haven't studied music, so quite often, if I know obviously the basic chords, but often I play in alternative tunings and I haven't really kind of what I'm playing. I just know the notes and I can hear it. But I find the visual, the kind of always responded to the call and respond way of music, which just comes from a lot of African American blues and soul, gospel. The way in which an instrument like a piano or a guitar and the voice, they play off each other. So that's why I like filming it, because I can see what I'm doing. I can see how I'm anticipating the line, or I'm not anticipating the line, or I'm drifting in and out of the instrument. So that's my way of doing it. I'm sure there's someone who's a professor of music who'd say there's an easier way of doing it, but I'm kind of stuck in this way of doing it. And like I said, I've got all these videos that are like phone propped up against the big bag in the middle of some hotel room in the middle of nowhere in Germany with cows out the window, and I'm there trying to, so yeah, strange process, but I if it works, you do it.
That's it. Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. Like, I think that like, so yeah, I know particularly with music, a lot of people will listen to a bit and just record themselves just jamming and noodling and then going back over it, and it's never something I've done a lot of, really. Well, I've done it, but I never listen back to it. But it makes such good sense to be like, I'm just gonna record a load of stuff and then go through it and see if anything is worth keeping.
Public Enemy, sorry to interrupt you. Public Enemy used to do that. Apparently, they used to have all these mad sounds going on, different mixes and different instruments and different. They'd be using samplers, and there'd be someone on the decks, and they said there'd just be this big mess. And then they suddenly would listen, and then in the mess, they'd just find a groove.
Yeah.
So they said that's how they would create, which is pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I mean, I'm very interested, but I think there's the point. I'm sure there is something in watching yourself playing of like, I think there's a thing with performing of like, watching yourself perform, even though a lot of people find it difficult, but it's a really good way of studying, of getting better, isn't it? It's like, like anything you do, watching yourself do it it's that assessing when you're not doing it. When you're playing yourself, it's really hard to be actually watching what you do and not paying attention to it. But if you're watching it separately, you can be like, oh, I didn't like the way I did that. That would be better if I did it this way. Or
I mean, I focus purely on like what my hands are doing.
Yeah.
Excuse me, because like for example, I'll play a chord and it will be like a B minor, and I'll just take a finger off one of the notes, and I won't quite know, because like I said, I haven't studied music. I won't know what I've done, and I know if I hear it back on a sound thing, I won't remember what I did and how I did it, or a certain bit of the song when I just slightly change the chord, or I go to a major chord, or I could record it and try and explain it, but if I can see what I'm doing, it just means I can quickly, my brain can memorize what I'm doing. So yeah, I've always found learning off visual things very helpful. And it's just a way of probably one of the few things where technology is a good thing in the world. I think I'm a bit of a Luddite, but
yeah. And I think it's now we all have phones, and it's so easy to do stuff like that, to record.
Yeah.
It's like it's good to make the most of it when you've got the access to it. That's again,
and get the idea down. That is one of the biggest things. I mean, there's so many times I wish I'd have got an idea down. I wish I'd have put this down. I had this. I could hear a song. I could be, I'm playing something really great, and then I get distracted. The bell goes, and it's gone. And you'll never find that again. You won't. You'll find something. You could find something similar, or you could find a variation of what you thought you're doing, but you will never find that exact same idea again. So I think get every idea down always. Record everything. I'm a total hoarder. I've got so many files of songs and rough ideas, and then it's got this filing system each year, rough ideas. And I know when I got serious about writing songs, I was at university, and I just wrote thousands of songs, and they were just, loads of them were trash. Like they were just, but you have to write all the bad ones to get ones you actually like. And I remember just going through them all, and I was like, I remember years later going through and going, what was I trying there? And I thought, well, hang on, if I hadn't have done that, I never would have been able to do the ones I like. And I think it was Willie Nelson who said you got to write 1,000 bad songs to write a good one. I think it was Willie Nelson, and I totally get it. You have to just write all these things out of yourself, and it's a craft. I mean, that's one thing that songwriters are taken for granted so badly, because you can just write a song. It's like, well, you can, but it's a real job. It's a craft.
Yeah. And like anything, the more you practice it, the better you get at it.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, definitely. Going back to the Heart of the Ocean, do you remember what kind of things, what kind of things happened in the other versions, and what was it that wasn't right about them, or when you got to where you got to, what was it? I'm always interested with speaking of songs that take a long time, and I've had one which I don't think was quite 15 years, but it was maybe 5 or 6 years, where again I had a verse or chorus, I think it was in the end, which just came to me like a whole section of lyric. And I tried to write it. And for me at the time, it was like, because I really liked the chorus, I thought that's really good. And I wrote so many versions of it that were just like, that doesn't hold up with the chorus. And eventually I had to co-write it with a friend, and she wrote a lot of the rest of it, because I think I was too attached to an ideal of it. But yeah, what was it like for you with this one in terms of how did the development go?
Stop and start. I find I've always found performing live is a great barometer of how a song is, the response to a song. And I was performing it live a long time before I recorded it, and I was performing on the guitar, and I had this kind of weird shimmer thing I was doing with delay, and it was, I knew I wanted an ambient sound, but it just wasn't, there wasn't enough there. It wasn't rich enough. It wasn't, I just kept thinking, people say, oh, that's beautiful. It's beautiful. And I was like, yeah, but I know it's not finished. I know it's not done. And then coming back to the piano, I got more serious about playing piano in my 30s. Definitely. I got really into that as an instrument more. I mean, guitar was everything like when I was younger, but I really got serious about piano. And having that kind of wash of a piano, the kind of, repeating kind of notes, and I don't know what the word is for it, but it's kind of, I guess they're arpeggios, I suppose, just kind of going around like that. I was trying to create a sound of an ocean, if you like. I was trying to create that kind of constant movement, a constant swirling sound of water. And I knew once I got the riff, and once I had the kind of ambience, the feel of the song, I thought, yeah, this can become something. So it was a lot of failure, a lot of trial error, getting things to a certain point, aiming for one thing, missing it, going for another thing, missing that. Samuel Beckett's famous quote about failing better, fail more. The idea of being an artist is going for the unobtainable thing. And I agree with that. You just keep trying to get better at what you do, but you're going to fail. You're going to get it wrong. You're going to get things, they ain't going to be like you want them to be, because that's life, Yeah.
And was there always, so take it, because you were performing it, you had other like full versions of the song?
I had 2 verses. I think after the first verse, it took about 5 or 6 years, and I added a second verse that I've since changed. The only thing that stayed the same all the way through was that first verse, because I just loved that. I knew once I had that, I really like this. But then the second verse never really worked, changed that. And then it just went back and forth, add a bit, take a bit away. It's like chiseling a bit of stone to get it where you want to. And then I think eventually I got the piano thing. I really like that piano, the swirling piano thing. And I just thought, write this thing, just sit down and do it. And that took me probably a couple of years, to be honest. So
Yeah.
it was back and forward, and it was a lot of writing and editing. Editing is, I think, even more difficult than writing. I think you have to be brutal with what you do, which is difficult. You get a great line, you know, oh, it's a great line, but you know what? It doesn't fit the song. That's one of the hardest things. I can't remember who said it. I don't drink anymore, but someone said, was it write drunk and edit sober? I thought that was
that's a good way to do it.
But I don't know who said that. But yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that somewhere, but I can't think of who it was. Yeah.
Probably someone who drank too much.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very different mindset, isn't it? The kind of like writing creative, having a good time mindset to the is this any good or not mindset. It feels like I always felt I had to do them like in separate sessions. I had to get into a different headspace to be in editing mode than I was in creative mode.
You want to try and write something as well. Like I mean, what I do is not mainstream at all, but you do want to try and write something, I think, that resonates with other people, even if it's just one person. People, can they relate to this? Is there something in their life that is, you know, this connects with? I always, from definitely, I'd say my mid-20s, I really tried to not write everything about me. I get really bored with songwriters and artists who's all me. I find that really dull, self-indulgent, you know, and it's no one's that interesting as well, by the way. You know, I don't care who you are. I mean, I love Jack Kerouac, but every single book is basically him and his mates going out, which is great. But it's like, you know, I always, from a certain point, thought this is way more interesting if you suddenly change the character, if suddenly I become someone else, and you just got this whole world of stories that are way more interesting than one person, whoever that person is. So that for me is really important. Yeah.
And so is that something that you do a lot how do you go about, I mean, I guess, do you have any kind of process for your work more generally in terms of particularly writing other stories? Are you constantly coming up with stories for songs, or do you hear stories in different places and make them into songs, or is it a kind of a combination of different methods?
Combination. I do write. I mean, I'm always writing. I always say I'm not writing, man, but I'm always writing. I'm always texting myself lyrics, emailing myself lyrics. That's the one I'm always doing. I've just got these constant stream of emails that will be a song and a phrase. Titles of songs I find very important. I think once I get the title, I can really create a story. I love having conversations with people as well, you know, and I like listening to people talk and saying stuff, and people come out with the best, you know, the best and most creative things. They often don't know it. They just say something, you know. Have a song called Open Your Heart to Love, which is like a combination of about 100 conversations on tour put together, and just, you know, all the pieces are put together. And that was just little chats with people on trains and planes and in between concerts. So people are really interesting. I mean, they really are. The things that people say, the things that people feel, and the experiences that people have, you know, that, I mean, it's, for me, when I hear people saying stuff, I just often just find myself writing it down, because I'm like, this is great. These are great lines. People don't even realize what they're writing, what they're saying, but it's art right before my eyes. You just got to grab it, and, you know.
Yeah, this really resonates with me with what we do at Swan Song here, where most of the time, you know, we're working with people who have never written a song before, and lots of time people come in and they say, like, "Oh, I can't write a song. I've not got anything to write about or to say." But then as soon as they start telling you about their lives and about things, it's like they've got a million things to say, and it's so then, like, you know, my job and my team's job is just to be how do we then shape this into a song? There's never a problem with people having interesting things to say and unique things to say, and it feels very. I just love it being able to hear those stories and then being able to help. Let me help you put them in an order that's going to work as a song. But yeah, you're completely right. People have, for me that becomes, so again, to go back to writing your own songs. Sometimes I find it hard to write my own songs now because I'm much more interested in writing other people's songs in a way. Because it's like I love hearing people's stories. Yeah,
absolutely, and they're just. you let them riff and let them, and the language is beautiful. People talk I tour a lot in Germany, and I can speak terrible German, but there's when I was in the north of Germany, I think is it expression moi. Everyone says moi for hello, goodbye, greeting. It's like this kind of constant thing is moi, and like that's only generally in the north of Germany they say that, because I've not heard that anywhere else in Germany, and I was fascinated by that because I was like, wow, everyone says moi. I think it's moi. I think that's the right expression. I'm sure you'll let a German person who corrects me on that, but there's this one expression that in the north of Germany, it's a really specific phrase, and I was fascinated by that.
Yeah, nice. One more question on Heart of the Ocean. Was there ever a point when you were working on it where you had a version where you were tempted to just be like, that'll do, even if you knew it wasn't right?
No,
no, you're always committed to.
Absolutely no, and I don't, and I'm really brutal actually with songs that don't make it. There's songs that are like, there's loads of songs that have just been cut off albums that I don't like. I have to be absolutely certain before it gets anywhere near an album, and it nearly, yeah. It found its way onto an album called The Beat Goes On, which is the first album after COVID. So there was quite a lot of songs about death, actually, about COVID. There was very sad songs, but then there was uplifting songs about remembering people in a good way. And Heart of the Ocean is actually meant to be quite an uplifting song. It's meant to be remembering someone for the, all the good things, not dwelling on, the loss, which we all do, obviously, because it breaks our hearts. But I had to get it to a good place. And like I said, I only signed off on it when it worked. And the producer, actually, he did a great job. He only has percussion on that, very light percussion. And he did a great job, because I wanted to add stuff and he said, don't, just leave it.
Yeah.
He was right. Yeah.
Yeah. It works well as that kind of that arrangement. Yeah. That, there's a Leonard Cohen quote that I heard one time where, he's famous for spending years and years on his songs. And he was talking about finishing a song that he'd been working on for years and years. And he said, I finished it. And I felt a level of satisfaction with finishing it. But then when I investigated it further, I realized that satisfaction was from was coming from my relief from boredom rather than my satisfaction with the song.
Brilliant.
Something like that. It's
probably you write another one. Yeah.
It's probably much more better worded than the way I said it there. Yeah. But that idea and that kind of like self-awareness to be like, oh, I'm happy that song's finished now. But the happiness isn't because you're happy with the song; it's because you're not working on it anymore. So then he made himself go back and.
He's famous for adding another verse, which is incredible. I do think you have to sign off on things, actually, because I would go crazy if I didn't have. I always try and put an album out every year to 18 months, just because I have to sign off on things, or I will go really, I'll lose it, basically, because I've got all these ideas I want to just put in a diary, and albums are my little diaries. So
Yeah, and it's a funny thing because there is there can be that temptation to just work for as long as you want on something if you don't have a deadline. And there's, like you say, there is part of it. There's definitely a benefit sometimes to being like, nope, this is where it's at now.
Yeah.
But then there's also a benefit to this song needs longer. It's
everything needs longer. Every song needs longer. Everything could be better. That's the whole point. At some point you have to sign off, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember I think it was when Franz Bon was on this podcast a few months ago. We were talking about this, and we were saying like, it's interesting with art that there's, the more you work on something, isn't always the better it gets. Yeah, sometimes it is, but sometimes the song that comes out in 3 minutes is just as good as a song that took years to write. There's no lots of things where it's the more you work at it, the better it's probably going to be. But with art, there's no guarantee either way, really.
But I think you have to do the work of the long work to get the short work to work. I think
that's true.
Practice makes perfect, and I think you couldn't write the quick song if you hadn't spent years on the one that doesn't work. That's my theory. I just think you have to really work it. I mean, I can't pretend that. I have to say I find songwriting exhausting, really tiring process. And there's times when, my default setting is practice. I just pick a guitar up and just suddenly get into something, or piano, get into a style of playing, and that's my kind of default setting. If I'm stuck, I'll just practice. And sometimes I just can't write because it's too much. Like the work recently, there's a group of songs I'm working on at the moment that are pretty bleak about the world, and I'm doing it in short bits because it's, you know, I don't feel that positive about the world at the moment because it's a bit scary, you know. And I'm aware that writing them is taking quite a lot out of me, and but like songs take a lot out of you. I think songwriting is exhausting. I mean, I love it. It's amazing and it's magical and it's the best feeling, but it's just so tiring. Your brain just scrambled at the end of it. I find anyway, you know. So maybe some people find it easy. I don't know. I'm very jealous of those people. It's not easy, I don't think at all, you know.
Yeah, hard work. Yeah, there was something I was going to ask you that. I forgot what it was now. Do you are there any particular differences from when you write on guitar to when you write on the piano that you find? Do you write different songs when you're on starting from either of them or anything like that?
Completely different. Learning to play piano was one of the most important things I did. We're going to talk about a mutual hero of ours, Tom Waits, and he would be a big reason why I started playing piano. Because I'm a better guitarist than than piano player. With piano, I had to be very, you know, very exact in what I do, and you know, I've improved as a pianist, but I came to it quite late. I started playing piano. I was about 21, and around the time I started writing Heart of the Ocean. And because I'm not as good at it, I have to really think about the melody a lot more. With guitar, you can get carried away with little tricks and effects and, you know, funny noises and funny, you know, percussive things they look flash and all that and stuff. But with piano, I feel I have to really focus on the melody. So massively important part of my writing to become a piano player, and a completely different process to guitar for me, which is great. And similarly, also writing just the lyrics is a completely different way of writing. So I try and open up as many windows for creativity as possible. You can't be rigid if I don't think as an artist. I think that's one of the worst things to be, because you just repeat yourself, and you should be open to trying new ideas. I mean, I've been co-writing more and more in the last few years, and I always said, "Oh, I'll never do that," and I was just complete rubbish. Like, you know, I should have tried it years ago. It's great, even if it doesn't work out. You get to know someone, you get to share music, and by the same token, I remember years ago saying I'd never try and learn to read music, and I had a go at it, and again, it was fascinating. I was just wrong the first time, but that process of trying something that didn't work. I mean, and it did work. I got to play like Beethoven for a few months. I loved it. It was amazing. It was great riffs, great songs, I think, you know, and but be open to new musical ideas, because there's a lot of good music in the world. There's a lot of great music in the world, you know.
Yeah, no, really good advice. Yeah. Let's move into section 2, shall we? This is where I ask my guests for a songwriting tip. And as I was saying to Sean before we started recording this, what happens a lot in this is lots of great songwriting tips come out in the first part. But here's where I ask my guests for a particular tip. So what would your tip be for us today, Sean?
I mean, one is, I might have give you a couple and you can edit me out.
Yeah, go for it.
I think study the masters. That is really important. I'm guilty of studying songs and getting bored and doing my own songs, which I don't regret. And quite often I find, I can't play certain things. So I'll be going for this thing. And I'm going to use a football analogy. I hope you don't mind. Bobby Charlton used to say when he used to shoot a goal, he'd always aim for the crossbar because he knew he'd miss it. And he knew he'd get it on target if he aimed for the crossbar. And obviously, he's one of the greatest players ever, Bobby Charlton, and one of the greatest shots ever as well. But he always had this idea that he'd aim for the crossbar, knowing that he wouldn't get the crossbar. He'd probably put it in the top corner instead. And that idea with songwriting, I think, is really true. I love this morning, me and my friend Mike Seal, he's a great songwriter. We picked up the Beatles songbook and we were going through all these songs and we were like, these are really difficult. We were trying to learn. They're really good. I mean, they're so great. Some of them are, you know, more simple than others, but we were looking at Blackbird and obviously that's just amazing. All these things going on. And then we went to Across the Universe and it's just like, whoa, totally different songs, but also really complicated. So we were studying these songs and we were both looking at each other thinking, this is really difficult because it is. But we went through that little warm up of trying to learn a couple of Beatles songs. And to be honest, not quite getting them. And then we came out of it and we ended up writing, editing a bunch of songs and writing our own songs. And what's really interesting about that, I don't know if you've seen the Beatles documentary about their final album with Peter Jackson, the Lord of the Rings guy. It's the last album. I can't remember the name of it. And they've got live footage of them creating. And I think every songwriter should watch that because they're writing all these songs. All these songs are happening all the time. But in between it, suddenly they just go into a load of Motown songs. Suddenly they just start playing covers of other songs. And it's like it's like their workout. It's like their encyclopedia of these songs. Oh yeah, let's just do a bit of Stand By Me. They suddenly go into that. And then suddenly they go into another one. And then suddenly through that, McCartney picks up a bass and he just writes Get Back like that. And you're like, oh my God. But they went through all of these studying the great songs to write their own great songs. So I think that is really important. Study your favorite songwriters. Think about what they do. Think about why you like them. Think about the melodies. Think about the lyrics. That thing I said about earlier on about the meter of the lyric. What I mean by that is the rhythm of the lyric. Things like think about how many syllables for each line. How many syllables there are in each line for a song, and how they relate to the chords and the chord changes, because then you see the rhythm of the song. I pick out Dylan because he's amazing at that. He just knows how to stop and change at the right time. People have followed him. Townes Van Zandt, someone I picked out. Modern era. Mary Gauthier is really great. Check her out. But like that thing, the meter of the lyric, combined with the melody of the song and how they relate. But that thing, study the masters. If I was going to pick out one thing, it would be that. And then just practice. Keep going.
Yeah.
So,
that's
one thing. If you want any more, I'll think them up.
Yeah, no, that's great. Sure. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And again, I'm sure I heard Dylan say something at one point about that he'd played 1,000 songs before he wrote one. So he'd learned 1,000 other songs. And yeah, it is just such a good way. And I definitely remember so I was kind of brought up, in covers bands and stuff like that. So you're learning lots of popular songs. So then when I started writing, it was like, oh, well, this song goes like this song goes like this. You've got kind of starting points.
Absolutely.
But then I remember having a phase where I started becoming thinking of myself as a songwriter.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, I shouldn't play covers anymore because I play my own stuff. And I had a phase where I didn't really do any covers. And then I've kind of completely gone back on it now where it's like, as you say, it's no matter how many of your own songs you have, it's really good to still learn other songs. And yeah, Tom Waits, who we're going to go on to, I've got his little black songbook somewhere, and that used to be part of my routine.
Too, yeah.
You got it. It's good, isn't it? That one, exact one, yeah. I got that somewhere about, and I just used to always feel like, sit down and feel like, oh, if I open that a random page, let's play that one today.
Yeah.
And you always learn something. And like I say, even if you're learning something hard and you don't nail it, like with Tom Waits, I remember, I think it's a G minor 11 chord, what he uses in, what song is it? I can't remember what song it is. It's one in there. It's got a way more complicated chord than I ever use anything else. But I was learning the song and that chord was in. I was like, oh, cool. And then I wrote a couple of songs of my own using that chord. I didn't learn the whole Waits song, but there was one G minor 11, or I can't remember what song it was now. But yeah,
he's amazing. I mean, he studied. Everyone says the Great American Songbook, and I think Joni Mitchell did as well. And the melodies, particularly on his early stuff. I love all of his music, but I think in the 70s he really seemed to be focused on the kind of melodic aspect of songwriting. I think in the 80s he got more into the kind of riffs and the feel rather than. But he's still written great songs after that. Obviously, there's so many great songs. But I think in the 70s, he was particularly interested in that, the Great American Songbook. You can hear it, the piano pieces, Tom Traubert's blues. They're just these beautiful melodies that are very sophisticated, not just lyrically, but melodically as well.
Yeah. And he's one of the things that annoys me when people talk about Tom Waits. Sometimes people say he's not a good singer because he's not got a clear voice. It's like, but he's an amazing singer. He's just not got a voice, and it's removing the skill of singing from the timbre of his voice So people sometimes think because his voice sounds the way it does that he's not a good singer. So no, he's a great singer. He just has a very unique voice.
He has
But
his own voice.
he knows
I mean,
how to use it very well.
that was something actually you were talking about tips, and I gave the one about studying the masters. If I was going to pick another one out for being a musician or an artist, it would be yourself. Try and create a sound that is you. We pick out Tom Waits because Tom Waits sounds like, I mean, I always hear Howlin' Wolf in his voice, but there's a whole load of other people and references. But he's specifically Tom Waits, and that, for me, the measure of great artists is they don't sound like anybody else. When you hear, pick out another one. John Martin is another hero of mine. When you hear him sing, it could be no one else. When you hear B.B. King play guitar, it could be no one else. When you hear Keith Jarrett play piano, it could be no one else. And there's all the great artists for me. That is the main thing. They don't sound like anybody else. They've got their own nation state, if you like. So, yeah.
Hello, I am Richard Gibson, and I wrote a song with the Swan Song Project for my son Leo, who died in 2021, aged 17. Leo loved to listen to and play music, so this felt like the perfect way to acknowledge our loss. Writing and performing the song has helped me express just some of the things that made Leo such a special person to so many people. It also taught me some wonderful creative skills I can use to help me with my grief. Now the song is finished, it is out there for anybody to listen to, keeping Leo's memory alive for as long as there are people to sing and hear his song. Please donate to the Swan Song Project to help more people like me write a swan song. Thank you.
So grateful for the time that we spent together. Our hearts filled with your love to carry forever.
So yeah, let's move in section 3 now, where we're going to talk a bit more about Tom Waits. So this is where I asked my guests for a song that's meaningful in some way related to bereavement. So which song have you chosen for us for this section, Sean? No prizes, people guessing which artist it's by.
Yeah, Tom Waits' "Dirt in the Ground." I have to say this was a really difficult decision. Actually, I went backwards and forwards, and I didn't get back to you for a while because I couldn't make my mind up what to choose, and I was really struggling about because I'm partly because of my own views of death. I'm not sentimental, really. And I shouldn't say that as a songwriter because it makes me sound really cynical. But I'm not really like. I think the magic of a lot of music, yeah, it lives on forever. But once you played it, it's gone. And I find that a lot of I've always seen life a bit like that. Once you're done, you're done. And that might sound a bit hard, but I just feel that if you do that, you can live each day with everything. If you know. And this is a hard approach to, but it's but at the same time, typical Tom Waits, it's a hard but beautiful approach to writing. He's got a great quote. What is it? I love beautiful melodies telling me terrible things. I've got that t-shirt.
Yeah, I used to have that.
The best. But he's right. It's like this, and I find a lot the sort of fake sentimentality with songwriting just turns me right off, man. I get really bored of that. I like songs that are grab you by the scruff of the neck and sort of, and they don't shy away from things. Like we all die. That's we can guarantee that. No, like, no one's getting out of here alive. You know what I mean? And that is in some ways our salvation for enjoying each day and giving everything to each day and finding the things that we care about and focusing on them and enjoying them. And this song is about that for me. It's, I mean, some of the lines are just incredible. I mean, there's one line I'm going to pick out. Hell's boiling over and heaven is all full. We are chained to the world and we all got to pull. I mean, that's the world, man. That could be any time of and we end the chorus, and we're all going to be dirt in the ground. He's right. We're all going to be worm food, and that, again, I don't say that to be brutal and disrespectful to anyone who's passed, because I get when you lose someone, it breaks your heart, all of us, but at the same time, it's that thing of when you've loved someone and when you've been with someone, when you've enjoyed who they are, that's the magic of it. And it's also, it's going to end because everything ends. And I love this song because it has, the beauty of, this. I'm trying to think, trying to look at a few more lines here that just blow your mind. Sorry, bear with me a second.
What I'll do here as well, for anyone who's
Yeah,
not familiar with the song, I'll put the link in the description where you can go and listen to it. It's an absolutely incredible song, and it's like, the sound of Waits' voice and the arrangement of the song and everything. It's just,
The quill from a buzzard, the blood writes the word. I want to know, am I sky or am I bird or a bird?
Yeah.
And it's like he's just creating this whole picture of writing lyrics and the birds and the sky and the idea you write the songs as blood, and it's the power of that. And there's always often these loads of biblical references. Now Cain slew Abel, he killed him with a stone. The sky cracked open and the thunder groaned. I mean, that's just right. And one thing Tom Waits does, one of many things, and he said this as well. He always grabs words that sing really well.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing I found really hard when I was trying to first write lyrics. You read these poetry and it's all beautiful and there's fields of this and then you start trying to sing it and you're like, this don't work. You can't sing a lot of those lines. But Tom Waits gets a word like, I'm looking at this groaned. That sings really well. Stone groaned, and the gallows groaned. He knows that he can wrap his voice around that.
It's a really interesting. That's another thing that comes up a lot in Swan Song when you're writing songs with people who don't normally write songs, and the songs that we write with people tend to be very personal. And so one of the conversations we have a lot is they'll write something which is like what they want to say, but then when you try and sing it, sometimes it doesn't sing well. It's not. So we often have these conversations because then what you want to do is find the sweet spot. I mean, not always. So or you make that decision of, does it say exactly what it says, word for word there, and the melody will won't be as consistent maybe, or won't sing quite as well, but it says exactly what you want to say, or do we change it? And in Swan Song, we have that conversation. Is quite an important one because sometimes the melody is secondary to the message, and then it's like, okay, we'll stick with that. But sometimes it's no, well, we can tweak this. So we get a lot like songs where this is the exact thing they would say. So we've got to say exactly as they would say it, otherwise the meaning's lost in a way. But people like Waits, I think he's one of the best examples because he's an unusual lyricist as well, isn't he? He's not like lots of pop songs where it sounds like it's probably the same 100 words that get used in lots of different pop songs that all sing well. But for Waits' words, you can read a lot of them, and there's very unusual phrases being done in them, but they still sing really well. They don't often sound out of place.
He's a poet. I mean, I love poetry, but maybe that's a bit. He uses poetic phrases in a way to create songs. I mean, another good example of one of his is "Burma Shave" is an amazing song. That is like a poem. It's like a short story of somebody picking up. I think the man picks up the woman and they drive and they crash. That's the story, and it's just this tragic story, but it's all this imagery around a little story. He says he does that. Apparently he'll get a taxi cab from somewhere, and he'll write down everything he sees. I've tried that and I've got nowhere. I got kebab shop, Sainsbury's. It just doesn't work. It's like, I don't know. He's obviously traveled and been in New York and LA, and he's really cool. Avenues, great names. That's another thing he's great at, is place names. That's a really important thing. I think that's very difficult in England. Actually, I do like England and I like living here, but place names is challenging. Leighton Buzzard, or it's hard. I'm sure Tom Waits could turn that into something, but it's difficult in England. The names are quite. I'm sure there's certain singers who could do it with kind of specifically local voices. You can do it, and I've got different, I wrote a song about Grenfell, and I got Grenfell, in memory of Grenfell Towers, and that's had to use really be careful with the way I sung that and how, because it's a heartbreaking topic, but it was like, it's difficult in England because the names are much harder to use. But Tom Waits he just picks out these great place names.
Funny, I had Sam Carter was on this podcast a few months ago, and he's one of the songs he talked about is called "Surprise View," which is about a place called Surprise View in the Peak District. But we were having this conversation then, and one of the things we were talking about was whether how much of that is familiarity. So, like, whether the places that like don't sound exciting to us that we walk down every day would maybe sound exotic to someone who lives in America who's like, oh, that sounds like a quaint place in England.
Quaint
and whether
is a good word, yeah.
quaint is a good word for it, isn't it? But yeah, I've thought that as well of like, the streets around sometimes songs that have a great street name. None of the ones around me feel like they would be poetic enough or have enough of an impact. But yeah, I've heard Waits say before about how he thinks songs need to be rooted and based in a place. You need to enter it. You need to be able to feel like, well, I know where I am in this world, and there's furniture there, and there's stuff like that, and which again he just does so well. He just creates such a unique space.
He creates an atmosphere, and that is yeah. I mean, it's just brilliant, and it's a great expression. Again, a title, that's a really important thing with songwriting. Titles, Dirt in the Ground. There's a number of songwriters have said that once you get the title, you've got the frame of the song. I think titles are so important. I collect titles. I've got a whole file of titles that are just, I don't know if I'm ever going to use them, but they're just there. There are just hundreds, thousands of names, titles that are just pluck them out the sky and then start writing. So
this might be a hard question, but do you have favorite Waits album or song or?
You know what? As an album, and this is really untrendy, and Tom Waits fans would shout at me for this. I know you're one. I absolutely love the first album, Closing Time, and I know, and it's not. He doesn't sound like he sounds normally. It's just there's a real innocence to it, and he's not trying to be Tom Waits. It's very like Dylan, but the songs are so beautiful. And that was the first album of his that I absolutely fell in love with. I remember I was 20 years old at university, and so many of those songs, I just thought I'm that guy in the bar looking at someone, wanting to talk to them and being too shy. And that feeling of, I hope I don't fall in love with you, and you do, and they've gone and it's too late. And then staying up at 2 a.m, drinking forever, drinking and listening to him. It was like, that album was the one that turned me on to Tom Waits. But as a song, oh God, difficult. Fumbling with the Blues is great. That's a great one. Yeah, that's a really great song. That's a great drinking song. And then I don't know. I mean, Shore Leave later on is that's like a short story poem. That's breathtaking. And then, I mean, I could go on forever with Tom Waits. There's so many. I haven't got one favorite song.
Yeah, it's really, really hard question.
Down in the Hole is great. I love Down in the Hole. Down in the Hole as well. The history of that, because it ended up being the theme tune for The Wire, which is one of my favorite TV shows. And the first series of that, the double bass player is Danny Thompson, who's a friend of mine, who's the legendary Danny Thompson, and he plays double bass with
on the Blind Boys version.
Yeah, it's with the Blind Boys version. And I remember saying to him, you're playing on my favorite TV show with my favorite songwriter, on that's a great record as well, The Blind Boys of Alabama. It's a great album. And it's just, it's impossible to pick one Tom Waits song out, actually. Invitation to the Blues is another one I love. I could go on forever. I'm sure you could too. What's your one? What's your favorite Tom Waits song?
If I have to, so again, I've had this conversation many, many times with different people, and I always think if I have to boil it down to one, I normally say Coming Up to the House.
Wow.
Which I've also said before that if I was a guest on this podcast and I was interviewing myself, which would be difficult, that would probably be the song I would choose for this section. And as I showed you earlier, I've got the world is not my home, I'm just passing through. Tattooed on my forearm, which is one of the chorus lines from that song. But I actually found out I heard it in that song, and then after I got the tattoo, I heard lots of there's spirituals from 100 years ago that say that line in them. So Waits obviously pinched it from somewhere else, but that song I've got really clear memory of when one of my uncles died when I was maybe 18 or 19. And go to visit him at the hospice. It was the first time I'd been to a hospice, which is actually a hospice that we work at a lot now with Swan Song. And I remember going home and being really upset about it and putting Coming Up to the House on. And it's one of those songs where I feel like it applies to so many different situations. The lyrics have that beautiful, artfully vagueness to them, where like you can be in a different situation and it can mean something different to you. But at that point, it just felt like it was just exactly what it was. Felt like Waits was just speaking to me in that moment of yeah. So that song is very, very special to me. And Mule Variations is probably my favorite of his albums if I have to name one. And I think the reason I think one of the reasons why I think Mule Variations is so special is I feel like it's a really good encapsulation of the range of Tom Waits, because it has some beautiful ballads on it. It has some beautiful, but then it has some real stompers and where some of the other albums are kind of more of one style. I feel like Mule Variations has such a beautiful collection. Yeah, Get Behind the Mule and Big in Japan and all those. It's just like I just love it.
There's so many things he's done. I mean, like the character he creates, he's touched upon, and the kind of preacher character he's kind of created as well. I mean, that straight away I thought of Chocolate Jesus on that album, which has got to be one of the most unbelievable songs about religion ever. Amazing songwriter. So many different things he touches on, and man.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Brilliant. Well, thanks a lot for your time, Sean. I mean, I'd love to go on talking about Tom Waits. We could go album by album if we had a longer time, but
yeah, we could.
I feel like we've done the job of the podcast for now.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks a lot for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. And I'll put all the links for your social media and everything in the description, so anybody watching this wants to find out more. And yeah, you're always out and about gigging and stuff, aren't you? So
I am. SeanTaylorSongs.com. And on the middle of a tour at the moment, back on the road again in the beginning of next year, sort of March. I'm up in Yorkshire and Saltaire in the end of March, I think it is.
Nice.
And I always tour spring and autumn. They're my touring time. So yeah.
Nice. Good stuff. All right, thanks a lot for your time, Sean. Really appreciate it. But yeah, thanks a lot for tuning in, everyone. I'll be back on another episode soon.